Imagine a dictionary. In this dictionary, you're supposed to define an entire language, every single word. Of course, just like in any other dictionary, you have to define the words using other words. But now let's say that this dictionary was completely empty and you had no words to start with to define a word. What can you do? Are you simply left with the choice that you have to invent a new word? You just have to arbitrarily choose a new word and then invent the words which you use to define that, and then justify that definition by inventing new words to define those words, and then once again inventing new words to define those words which you used to define the previous words. And this loop continues. You constantly have to invent new words to define the words that you previously used. Is that the only choice that you really have? And what does this tell us about ourselves and our knowledge? Let's say this dictionary, this empty dictionary, depicts our knowledge. Do we have any axioms which we can base our knowledge upon? Do we have some of the first words that then we can use to define new words? Or do we simply have to make stuff up? Could these axioms of our knowledge be biological? Like, for example, we have a biological inclination to value our own lives. That might be a word. But even if we have some of these axioms, the question is, should we trust them? Should we try to change them? And how do we justify them? Do we simply try to justify them just like we try to justify the new words that we invented by then inventing more words to define and justify the previous words? Do we now have to invent new things to justify the axioms that we have within us in our knowledge? You see, this is the philosophical problem. If our knowledge is like the empty dictionary, then surely aren't all of our beliefs, all of our knowledge simply at some point arbitrarily chosen, and then we simply have to try to justify them later on with new things that we gather? And at some point we have to admit that that is circular. Just like in a dictionary, you have to first use words to define a word, and then you can use that word to define new words, which then you can use to define the words which you originally used to define the very first word. It creates this circle, in a sense circular logic, where you just simply have to begin at an arbitrary point and then build upon it. But at any point, you could criticize it and just say that that is circular, that is actually not based upon anything foundational, anything axiomatic. And if that is our knowledge, and if this kind of a dictionary can represent our knowledge, and we don't have any axioms, we simply arbitrarily choose things like the law of identity or the law of non-contradiction, does that mean that even our knowledge to some degree is circular, where we simply choose some things like logic and then we try to justify them later on, but in reality they have no real basis? For example, let's look at if we look with our eyes and we see a tree. First we must arbitrarily choose that this tree is not a part of the planet. Even though its roots are in the ground, we pick it out and choose that that's a cutoff. That is not a part of the ground anymore. That is a new thing called a tree. And then we justify that by saying, well, we can cut down the tree and take it apart and take it from the ground, even with the roots, and build something with it. But didn't we at some point arbitrarily choose that that is a tree and that is not part of the earth? Even though the earth itself can be infinitely split into smaller and smaller parts from first a big area of land to a smaller area of land, and then to a few bits of sand or dirt, and that sand or dirt can then be split into smaller areas of atoms, and then electrons, and then quarks, and so on. So is all of our knowledge simply at some point chosen arbitrarily? Or is there some unshakable foundation that we can rest our knowledge upon? That is the question I would like to ask you, and I would love to hear your answers, because this is a big philosophical question. Now, of course, this is not something you need to worry about in your day-to-day life, but if you really like philosophical questions, this is one to think about, and if you give a good solution to it, I might come and shake your hand. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a lovely day.